Hello, you writing rebels. I'm Kristen McTiernan, and you're on Nonsense Free Kristen. Today I'm talking with Jon Del Arroz, a science fiction author, comic book creator, and the founder of Fandom Pulse, a favorite over here at Nonsense Free Kristen. Jon has found himself in the headlines, not only for writing for mainstream media in the past, but also for being banned from major platforms like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and even the World Science Fiction Convention. Wow. Similar to other authors that we featured on this channel, it wasn't because somehow the quality of his writing was deficient. No. It was for his politics and his willingness to say what he believed. But that's not all that keeps Jon in the news. In this day of online rage bait, Jon has one of the most controversial takes in all of publishing. He openly uses AI. He doesn't hide it. He doesn't obfuscate. He says, yes, I use generative AI. More than that, he argues that in many cases, with editing of course, AI is superior to what humans create. Now, I can hear you screaming at the screen right now. I accept your anger, but you might have a new opinion after listening to Jon and hearing how he came to that conclusion. Whether you love him or hate him, looking at Jon's career raises a lot of questions about cancel culture, exactly how we, the writing community, police ourselves, and what it truly means to be independent. One thing's for sure, he doesn't apologize for any of it. And we respect that here on this channel. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so let's start off. Who are you and what do you do?
I am Jon Del Arroz. I do a lot of different things. I'm a very creative person in these spaces, and I run Fandom Pulse, which is your pop culture and entertainment news source. I write sci-fi novels, I write fantasy novels, I write comic books, and I run 4 different YouTube channels, which is a lot of fun, just depending on the topic.
All right, so super prolific. A lot of people, if they know you at all, it's mostly from the comic books world, and it's probably from, I think the first time I heard of you was when you were banned from Kickstarter. You had projects banned from Indiegogo, so you are perhaps not the original canceled comic book creator, but that is kind of how your name became known to normies like me who are not necessarily in the community. And I know that you've mentioned some shadow banning going on YouTube as well. Can you walk us through the specific mechanics of why do these platforms narrow in on you? What is it about your message, your content that makes them be like, yeah, that guy, that's who we're going to cancel, not the furries and the child prawn purveyors. It's this guy.
I don't know. I'm obviously right-wing. I'm overtly Christian, and I'm very vocal about it. And it seems that I just have a lot of people who just get really incensed about what I say, which is just the truth, and then they go and mass report me places. The first time I got canceled was from the World Science Fiction Convention in 2018. And they banned me as I was in tandem with the Science Fiction Writers of America, SFWA, because I was going to join SFWA because I actually qualified, which at the time meant that you had to sell a book over $5,000 worth of revenue. Now they've since lowered their standards because they can't get people who actually make money to join their club anymore. But at the time, that was kind of a big deal. And even though I didn't really want to do too much with them, they're not really a useful organization, I wanted to join just because I could. And I tried to join. And I noticed that I was getting death threats and things like that at the time, which are a lot of fun. And I was planning on going to Worldcon with a bunch of different conservative authors in the independent sphere. And my thought was, okay, we're going to set up a table. I'm going to just live stream the whole time, have a great show, and interact with people. I was going to just try to be the Charlie Kirk of Worldcon and just have a table, debate me, let's talk. And hopefully my intention was to be like, look, we're all humans here. And you might have your left-wing politics. I have my right-wing politics. We can still come together and enjoy Star Trek and enjoy Game of Thrones or whatnot that we all enjoy. And you guys don't have to act like this because it's a little different than online. Unfortunately, they couldn't have that. So what happened over the course of that year was actually all the conservative authors who were going to come with me they got cold feet and they said, you know what, the environment's too hot. They're rioting in Berkeley and doing these things at this point. We're not coming. So it was just me at that point. And I was like, okay, well, I've gotten death threats. It's been scary. And I asked Worldcon, I said, are you going to provide any extra security or anything like that? I'm a little nervous about this. Zero response. And so I started just talking about it like I do here. And I'm like, you know what? I don't know what the answer is. Maybe I have to like wear a body cam or something like that. So they all started flipping out, that I was going to wear a body cam. And it's like, well, why would that be a problem? Like,
Yeah, this is a public
and
space.
so,
It's weird that
right.
that would be a problem.
It's weird that it would be a problem. And so when that all occurred, it just started escalating. And there was a group called the Codex Writers, which is like a SIFWA feeder group. At the time, were conspiring with members of the SIFWA board who were in there to write Worldcon and get me banned. And I didn't know this till later. Somebody actually showed me screenshots of it. And that's actually how it all went down. So I bought a ticket to Worldcon anyway, just like I'm going to go and I'm going to hold my ground. And then I am going to Disneyland with my kids. And I get a bunch of phone calls just like you just got banned from Worldcon. And I'm like, what? Yeah, they posted it all over their social media and everything. And I'm in line for like Mr. Toad's Wild Ride or something like that. And I'm just like, grabbing my phone, going, "What's going on here?" And they have this whole scrawling screed about like how they need to make a safe and inclusive environment, the usual spiel. And they label me a racist bully. And they say that we're going to ban racism and bullying from our convention wherever it crops up. And so at that
Hate those
point,
Latino racists. Hate them.
it's like, okay. And so it was really fun. And an attorney who's a great guy messaged me and said, "Hey, I can probably represent you in this. This is libel." And I said, "Okay." And because it's a big institution, I was a nobody. I had maybe 300 followers on Twitter at the time. I had a couple books out. It's very bizarre. I was targeted on this level. And it turns out the guy who ran the con argued with me about Trump on Twitter a year earlier. The guy knew who I was and was gunning for me. And just because of like, he was mad about Facebook argument over Trump. He did call me a bully and a racist, and I had to fight this. And of course, obviously got blacklisted from publishing at that point. And all the left wing like blogs and all that started calling me these horrible things. And I'm like, who are you? And I'd try to talk to these people, and they'd always just get agitated and angry. And even when you try to talk to them, and then they wouldn't talk, and then they'd all block you. And it seems like that's the case. Every time there's a cancel mob, one person starts it. It goes around, it escalates, and then they just block you, and they all mass block you, and then they all talk smack about you, and then it goes to a bigger network, and then they all do the exact same thing, and then it continues on. So that's really where it started. And then I think once I kind of started the whole Comicsgate movement after that, once I saw what was going on in Marvel and DC Comics, I wrote that up for the Federalist, which is a pretty huge media outlet. And that went viral. I started going on I went on One American News Network. I went on different radio shows talking about that article as that went viral. Once I was kind of associated with that, it seems like it just spiraled that anytime anybody saw me, they just start banning me. It's really annoying because with Kickstarter in particular, I have run 12, 13 campaigns successfully. I'm very prolific, as you noted at the beginning of this. And I've done very well. My stuff's just like basic comic books. And if you look at the stuff on Kickstarter for the most part, it's all just like pornography wrapped up in a comic book shell. And that's what sells it. They really have a problem with not even having real storytelling or real comic books on there very much. And you would think they'd be wanting to support just normal creators. But I got mass reported in 2024 because my campaign was, I think it made $50,000-$60,000, something like that, close to 1,000 backers. And I was getting too big. And so people were noticing me from the mainstream industry. They were tagging Kickstarter on Twitter from DC Comics. A couple people were. And I think that the guy who runs the head of Kickstarter for comics he's former Boom employee. So he's tied in with all them. Then, got the message. And since all these companies do what they do, once a couple of them have banned you like that, they go, well, he's banned everywhere. Obviously, it's him who's a problem because otherwise he wouldn't be banned everywhere. So therefore, we are valid in banning him. And that's the real danger of cancel culture right there. It's just impossible to get out of that whole cycle, really.
Oh, absolutely. And it's the collusion. Like, obviously, we are not fans of Andrew Tate on this channel, but it was mighty suspicious that he just got banned from literally everything all on the same day. and we're just supposed to expect, oh, well, it's just he just happened to violate the terms of service on 18 different websites all at the
Right.
same time. It's like, no, I'm so sorry. I don't believe you.
Ironically, I tried to make a comic book making fun of Andrew Tate because I thought it was ridiculous, and I got banned. That comic book, particularly before this was well before my ban, they refused to run that comic book on Kickstarter just by itself. And I'm like, I'm not allowed to make fun of him. Like, don't you want a comic book that says his message is stupid if you don't like him?
Ironically, is it
It,
he making comic books now or graphic novels where he's funding
Yeah,
them?
I was making fun of his comic book. So I discovered that one early on, and he was selling a comic book for $105, and I'm like, this is absurd.
What was it made
And
of?
it was just a regular comic book, and it wasn't even like a big, thick, nice tray. It was, I collect leather-bound books. Like,
Mhm.
it wasn't like this. It was just like a regular comic book. So I, just as a YouTube stunt, decided to buy it and then review it. It was so low quality and so bad. It was the most laughable thing I've ever seen in my whole life. So that's why I decided to make a parody book making fun of him. And they would ban me from comic book groups for reviewing it just because I read the book and bought the book. And I'm like, you guys are crazy. Like, I'm mocking him. Don't you want that mock? No, but I mean, once it comes into that sort of unpersoning cycle, they just go absolutely crazy.
So there is this narrative, especially, you and I are both pretty active on X. And because, all of the grossest lefties have retreated to blue sky, I think there's this idea that, oh, cancel culture's over. We won. The tide has shifted. But if you look at sales, if you look at those, the ability to really do that big promotion for actually independent works, from what I can see, if you look at the traffic numbers, it's certainly if you look at the sales data, from my perspective, that's not really accurate. And you have moved to fund my comic for your crowdfunding campaigns, including your most recent, the Valiant Frontiers project. And the reason that you're on Fund My Comic is because you are still banned from Kickstarter
Correct.
and all of the rest of them. So other than those two, woke-owned corporations, have you seen that the tide has actually shifted, or is that just kind of comforting behavior that we're giving ourselves over on X?
I think it's comforting behavior because an author with no following was telling me, oh, maybe I just won't go to Kickstarter because I've seen this kind of behavior and I don't think it's good over there. And I'm like, if you're not banned from Kickstarter, you should still put your comic book on Kickstarter. I get that they banned me, and I'm not really the type to call for boycotts of things like that or anything like that. Because here's the deal: Kickstarter makes 4% or 5% on each comic. Stripe makes 5%. And so if you're on there and you're selling and you sell 1,000 comics, Kickstarter's getting $50. That's not really getting their operation, but the creator who gets $1,000 on Kickstarter, if they go on Fund My Comic where nobody's searching, which I'm not, obviously I'm wearing the Fund My Comic hat. I love Fund My Comic, no cap to them, but there's no people who just go to that website without somebody directing them first.
Right.
There are people who just peruse Kickstarter. I was talking to Mark Miller earlier today from Netflix, and he just put up a Kickstarter comic. And he said the reason he put up Kickstarter's comics is he was sitting in a bar, and somebody told him, "Oh yeah, my husband just when he comes home from the pub after a few drinks, just goes on Kickstarter and just buys random comics. That's just what he does."
Mhm.
And he's like, "Oh, cool. I'm going to put my that seems like an untapped audience." And Kickstarter does have an untapped audience, and this is the same thing I always tell people with Amazon. I get it. They're an evil corporation. They're terrible. But look, I could show you right now. Fund My Comic, it's a beautiful thing. And I have a couple of problems. One, the economy is really, really bad right now. And I know this. Two, people just don't go to Fund My Comic. And I'm selling novels on Fund My Comic right now, which is head problem, right? Because
Mhm.
it's like, this isn't a comic. And so I know I have a couple of problems just like with the offering right now. But I just launched a book on Amazon 2 months ago. And that book sold over 2,000 copies in its first month. I just launched the Valiant Frontiers in Fund My Comic. It sold about 35 comics, or I'm sorry, novels in its first day. So there's a disconnect, and obviously the readers for books are on Amazon. So you want to be on Amazon. You want to be on Kickstarter if you're doing comics. You want to be on YouTube if you're doing videos, as much as everybody's going to Rumble and the like. It's the same situation. The audiences are not there on those alternative platforms, and you should stay on the biggest platform possible until they kick you off is always my advice. And that's why I don't do the boycott thing, because it's about supporting the creator first. These giant companies, it doesn't matter if we boycott or leave or whatever. It's not hurting them. It's only hurting the creators.
Absolutely. And with the cancellation, people think it's only coming from one direction, but it's absolutely not, because you said earlier that you were actually a founding voice of the Comicsgate movement, but then later on, certain elements within there kicked you out or canceled you because what, you were too right wing, or it was just a coup?
With this situation, the rift actually became Eric July, and if you're familiar with him, he's a big YouTuber who has 500,000 YouTube subscribers. He's got his Ripaverse comics going on, and if you were positive towards Eric July, you were just kind of not welcome in those circles at that point, because Ethan Van Sciver, I'll just name names because I don't care. Ethan Van Sciver made his entire identity about hating Eric July at that point. And it was very, very weird. And so I'm just rolling along, and I was covering, and what I try to do, I try to do my best to cover things that are happening in the conservative right-wing sphere, Christian sphere, positively, because there's nobody else really covering that positively who has a big following. They always focus on whatever the algorithmic trend is, and so they leave everybody else in the dust. And that's a big failing of our influencer class on our side. And so I try to cover things like that. I try to cover, and you do a great job of this, by the way, too. I've seen the people you have on your interviews, and a lot of those people would not get coverage otherwise. And so God bless you for doing that. But with Eric July, he was with Ripaverse when it was taken off. It was a big, big deal, and it was definitely worthy of coverage. And I still cover several of his projects as they come out, depending on news times and cycles and things like that. But the thing is, like, the audience was so hateful towards him that Ethan would get super chats off of saying things. And did you see JDA made another Eric July video? He's such a shill, blah, 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 blah. It would happen. And eventually Ethan, who was just being cordial for a while, just went with the audience super chats and starting progressively saying nastier and nastier things. And then eventually he just went full tilt, and it's like, okay, well, I guess that's over now. But there are people here who are just here for like blood sports, and they just want the super chat money, and that's all they care about. And that class actually gets enough algorithm boosts from these things, because they get a lot of engagement, that it causes a lot of problems for just building a cultural movement in general.
And the cancellation comes from kind of a lot of different things, a lot of micro things. But one of the big ones that I've seen, and I commented a little bit on it this week, is this AI hysteria. So most people, including you and I, are a little bit skeptical of generative AI used for the text of the book, because a book purchaser is buying book text. They want it to be a good story. They want it to be good phrasing. That's what they're paying for. So using that for the actual text, we're like, if you're going to use it, be careful. For me, I've always said that I'm AI neutral. Use it in the best way that you think you need it. Some people are, I got into a Twitter spat with this preposterous human being saying, well, if you say that you're against AI text, but you use AI generated images in your social media posts, you're a hypocrite. And it seems to be almost a religious fervor where people are planting their flag and they're looking for people to cancel because they don't like it. Now, you are unique in that you are open about your AI usage. You have one of your pen names. Like we said, you're very prolific. You write across multiple genres, and you have multiple pen names. One of those pen names, you say, look, this is not a real person. I create these books heavily using AI, which of course heavily edited, heavily beta read and corrected after the AI generates it. But that's how this particular pen name gets work out. So what? You also use AI assets with art. That makes you more prolific, and it also gives you, I guess, an edge, because all of these AI works. And I love that you said this. People say we must use human artists, but if you look at what sells, the better AI generated covers sell better than the human created covers that, aren't so great. So tell me about your AI usage, how you made the decision not to use it, because I think a lot of people are, if not everybody. You were open about it. So what was that decision about?
Yeah, I just was tooling around with it and I thought it was fun. I mean, it was that simple. I wasn't really thinking about it beyond, oh, this is kind of neat.
Hmm.
But I started getting into it and I started noticing that you're talking about generative AI and the text having problems. I started noticing that you could do it and it didn't have problems. And the quality actually is there. Now you have to know how to prompt it and you have to have a lot of controls on it. And I've done a pretty lengthy video for my Subscribe Star supporters where I've gotten into it, and I actually got this comment back because I showed my whole process of even how I start things, which is I feed almost a whole novel worth of information into the AI of my own writing, and I say analyze my own writing and use that prose style, right? And so the joke is the best way to do AI writing is to do a bunch of your own human writing first,
Yes.
and the answer is yes. Right. Which is true. But as I've gone through, I've submitted through my AI pen name to different magazines and things like that, short stories. And yeah, they all ask, I mean, now they're getting to the point where they're like, we do not accept generative AI, so do not submit it. But the thing is, I just don't say anything because I'm actually doing it as an experiment to see whether they can notice or not, because I'm very fascinated by that. And I have not had one. I've been rejected from magazines with my AI writings and things like that. I've been accepted also, but I've not had one come back and say this is AI writing and you're not welcome to submit here anymore. Not one. They cannot tell.
Mm-mm.
Now, and actually, AI detectors cannot tell if you do it right as well. And so there is a misnomer as to quality with AI, which is just immediately debunked. And that's honestly, I think most people kind of understand that because they wouldn't be upset. They wouldn't be like in this religious fervor of hating AI if the quality was that bad and it wasn't going anywhere. If
Mhm.
it was that bad, there's no reason to be afraid of it. But their fear is that it's that good, and it's actually better, than 90% of authors out there. And because of that, they feel like they're not going to get their turn to get discovered or whatnot. Is what I think the psychology is.
I
But
think you are absolutely
yeah,
right. And especially when people are clamoring, no, I don't care that you use AI. I just want you to label it. Why
right.
do you need a label?
If
'Cause-
you could if you could tell, and I had this on my when I posted my Valiant Frontiers, because I'm openly pro AI, I got a bunch of like this is AI slop, and I'm like this is like painted covers by a real artist that I actually spent the most money out of any artist on ever. Not only that, but these books I've been spending the last year and a half, 2 years writing them, putting more hours and work into it ever with no AI. It shows that you just are lashing out, just trying to witch hunt about AI, and you don't even care that I have the human work. You're not even going to support the human work at all.
Mhm.
So like it's just a complete hypocrisy thing. I think that's why I upset people a lot because I really don't care about narratives. I do care about hypocritical stances that are stupid.
Mhm.
And so I go out of my way to do things like make a pen name that's completely AI and show that that's easy to be successful and do right and make good books. So it's a virtue signal. And that's
Right.
exactly what the left's done with all this stuff, with this
Mhm.
diversity, equity, and inclusion crap. It's the same mentality stamped onto the AI situation. And none of the arguments that they have, the soulless slop. Well, in traditional publishing, you have DEI slop. And then actually what's at the top of Amazon that most people are reading, it's algorithm writing slop, which a lot of these writers in science fiction fantasy just write to market.
Mhm.
And what was the one I was showing the other day to people? It's level up harem, right?
Yeah.
It's like okay, do you really think that's better than better than AI? No.
Right.
And the thing is, Amazon's so filled with slop already
Mhm.
that and people like people and there's honestly nothing wrong with people liking it either. I don't mind if somebody maybe level up harem. There's something wrong with people liking
Yeah.
that. But as far as algorithm writing stuff or writing into market stuff, people want something familiar. So it's the same thing in military science fiction. With I always make fun of it. Like I'm a space marine and I'm a damn good one too. And I even do the voice like because they all have that exact same voice to every single one of those books.
Mhm.
They all have the exact same plot lines. They don't even really have much science fiction to them. They don't usually have cool alien concepts or anything like that. And yet it's like the top of every science fiction category is dominated with those books.
Mhm.
And so that's slop. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with you enjoying that or whatnot. And I enjoy that from time to time too. But at the same time, like to be mad at AI saying that it's going to algorithmically copy something when all these human writers are algorithmically just copying tropes doesn't like just because it's not human doesn't change anything. It's the same thing.
Oh yeah, and I think it
Ridiculous.
was one of the first Substack articles of mine to pop off, and it was basically saying you have made yourself replaceable, you fiction author, because you are writing to these formulas. You are slavishly adhering to the right to market tropes and the save the cat format. It's like you are making it so that a machine can perfectly replicate the crap that you put out. You did this and now you're complaining about it. And I think this was like when ChatGPT first came out. You know, image generation wasn't even the thing people were flipping out. I'm like, what are you flipping out about? You decided that you wanted to be very formulaic in what you were creating. Why then are you surprised or upset that it can then be systematized by an AI? I mean,
And that's my advice to authors. If you want to sell, you pick a market and you kind of write the same thing over and over again and kind of file the serial numbers off of it.
mhm.
That's the best way to make money. And the reason my AI is making good money right now is it's literally doing that in that genre. Now, I use AI for a few reasons. I have that experiment running,
Mhm.
but I also have it write short stories and weird, sort of arty things that I wouldn't have time to do myself because I know it's not going to make any money. I use it for that. And then I use it to write genres that I wouldn't spend time on. Otherwise, I've got a romance novel I just wrote, for example, and I'm not going to
Mhm.
spend time doing that. But because I can do it in AI, I can write a novel in 10 hours, which is about what it took, and then be pretty happy with the romance novel and just have that. Now, on my normal stuff, I'm bad about this. Like I'm not following my own advice. If you
Mhm.
look at my career as an author, I have a lot of stuff out, but it's always like I get on a sort of kick of something that interests me and I want to pursue that creatively and I do that. That's a bad way to be an author in 2025. People want their genre tropes and they want a cookie cutter exactly what it is. Valiant Frontiers is not a cookie cutter sort of thing. It has a dressing where it is a space ship that's going and traveling, but I've put a lot of work into the world building to where it's definitely not Star Trek, right? And so it is its own thing. And so it doesn't look like Star Trek and it doesn't feel exactly like Star Trek. It does, it's got the same kind of they go to a planet, there is a problem. And each book has a very highly different high concept to it because I'm focusing on the high science fiction concepts that's the most important part of science fiction, in my opinion. And because of that, they all feel very, very different as books. That's not the way to really go forward with things. And I think the best example of this, and for what fan reactions to that, is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. Ender's Game is a brilliant novel. Everybody loves it. When he came out with book two, Speaker for the Dead, it was a shock because it was a weird, different, crazy, insane science fiction concept that was, by the way, in my estimation as an author, more brilliant than Ender's Game is by far. And yet, when I read it as a teenager, I read Ender's Game. I'm like, yeah, Battle School, the bugs, right? And then I read the next one. And I'm like, what the hell is this? And I hated it when I was a kid,
Mhm.
right? Now that I'm older and I've read it a few times, it's my favorite novel of his. Speaker for the Dead is wildly philosophical. It is got incredible science fiction concepts to it, but he didn't do the same thing twice. And he didn't do what you expected as a reader, and therefore I think he turned off a lot of people from his work from Ender's Game because he was experimenting artistically, and people don't like that. And if you look at what he did later, he actually went back and wrote a bunch of Battle School books because the publisher wanted that because that's what was going to make money for him. So if
Mhm.
you want to make money, you repeat the tropes, and AI can do that just as well as humans. If you want to be, an artiste, well, you kind of can't complain that you're not going to be the number one bestseller in the genre about that because you're being an artiste, right? And that's just kind of how it works. It's
Absolutely.
it's. I wish it wasn't like that. I wish that wasn't my advice for people, but that's the reality of the market.
Well, that leads into my next question because I always tell people, if you want to sell, you need to get out there, be the face of your books. You need to build an audience off of who you are as a person. But you have this whole AI brand, obviously, and I think it's under a woman's name, where you're obviously not saying, "Hello, I'm the author of this, and yeah, you should buy it." How are you selling these books when it's under a pen name? You're not using your face to push it. So how do you get those sales to come in for that brand?
That one, I let that one know it's me. That's not my hidden AI test pen name. I'm actually hidden AI test pen naming in science fiction and fantasy just so I can have that exact blind test of I'm writing the same genre and doing the same things, but it's detracted from my brand. So like, how does that work? Yeah, so I took a female pen name for my romance novel
Mhm.
and just sold it. And the first one actually I did was not AI. It was I actually wrote it myself, and I did not do incredible, but it did reasonable. And the second one I've not put out yet. I'm actually waiting on that, but I did do it complete with AI, and I'm just building a separate author profile, and I'm using SEO tactics and design tactics for covers and blurbs that I already know. I mean, it's a crapshoot. It could be, but I don't expect it to be as successful as what I'm doing with my face out there. But it is doing well enough that it's profitable and making me side money also.
Mhm.
And so I would say that if you have no brand, it's very, very hard to get anything out there. But if you already have one, you don't necessarily have to be the face of it if you actually know how to do the, I guess, SEO portion of it.
Mhm.
If that
So you're
makes sense.
driving traffic from your existing brand. So you've got Fandom Pulse, which is doing gangbusters, powered by Substack. So you're driving traffic from the people who follow you personally. Are you running ads? Or are you running like what else are staples to drive traffic to that brand where it's
Yeah,
you per
Phantom
se?
Pulse is great.
Mhm.
And I just write articles on topical things and then put my book link at the bottom of that. And then
Mhm.
when I have a new release, actually write a full article and blast it out to the email list there. Same thing with YouTube. Every day I run YouTube, usually based on my articles, and then I talk about it. You know, the quartering has his. I've got my coffee brand coffee, but I do that with my books, right?
Mhm.
And so that drives traffic for that as well. But I'm also running probably about uh, $500 to $1,000 of Amazon ads per month in the back end. That I've done a lot of work. I did Brian Cohen's Amazon ad school back in the day,
Mhm.
and just spent hours and hours and hours setting that up. And they kind of run themselves. You have to tweak them a little bit, but once you get it all set up, but it's a lot of work to set up. So I do those three things. I got a newsletter I hit, and then I try to go. I haven't done this as much in recent years because I got a little baby, so it's a little harder on
Mhm.
time right now. But I try to get around to shows like this, or even there's smaller shows out there that you just go around. And when I have a new campaign out, I try to make the rounds a little bit.
So the newest campaign you've got is the Valiant Frontiers. Now, it's like you said, it's not Star Trek with the serial numbers filed off, but I think we all know that there's a big gap in the market for people who look at something like Star Trek Discovery and say, this is not what I want. This is not why I liked Star Trek, and they're looking for things to fill the gap. So on TV, we had the Orville, which was serviceable, started off as a spoof, became a serious kind of Trek show. And now in book form, we have this very unique Valiant Frontiers that you have on Fund My Comic, even though it's not a comic, it's actually
Even though it's
a,
not a comic.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's a novel. So you're kind of, expanding what they do there. So what does that look like in terms of the kind of novels that you are writing? So you said this is more like episodic, where it's not like like TV shows nowadays are basically an 8-hour movie. That's not really what you're going for here with the books, right?
Yeah, I started watching. My wife's a normie, so she doesn't really watch science fiction until like I really pushed her into it, right?
Mhm.
And so we started watching The Next Generation, and that was happening about the time Discovery season 5 was wrapping up, and I was watching Discovery, and I wasn't making her watch Discovery. I was
Mhm.
watching that by myself
God
just because
bless
I'm
you.
like I'm gonna finish Star Trek all of it. But I was watching Discovery, and I'm like, this is like I can't even sit through it. Like I have to do the dishes while I'm watching Discovery or something because I can't sit still. It's that bad. And that format of just having one plot that extends for 10 episodes, it's like, it ends up being 10 hours. Well, a movie's 2 hours. I mean, that's a lot to extend one plot for. So you end up having a lot of lull time and a lot of boring episodes in between things and all these streaming shows. I think this format's terrible all the way around for TV. I don't think there's one streaming show that has that kind of format that really like sticks for multiple seasons like Next Generation did.
Mhm.
And I looked at Next Generation as a result, and I'm like, well, they went in and they had real science fiction's problems and they could solve them. And you'd look at something where the holodeck would come alive and they have to determine whether it's a real life or not. And then even though he's a bad guy, they're going to preserve life and yet try to have to save the Enterprise from him at the same time. And it felt like they could actually solve that within the window of time that they were presenting on that. The other thing about Discovery is like they'll just be like they'll be running around. They'll say things as fast as they possibly can that don't necessarily make sense. Like I know technobabble on Star Trek doesn't really make sense, but it felt internally consistent. Like Discovery, they just say, "Oh, the micro infuser, just attach it to the it's hull plating," and then they swear in Discovery too. So they'll just be like, "I'm having science," right? And they'll remind you that they're doing science because it's not very scientific, and it's like this doesn't fit. And yet Next Generation had that where you actually felt like you were watching something a little more intelligent. And so I was like, okay, so there's something here where it's like you can have a science fiction dilemma and problem, and the crew has to solve the problem, and it feels like it can actually happen. You have that suspension of disbelief that it's almost real, even though this is kind of a fantasy, right? I started writing The Soul Catcher because of that, and coming up with the plots, like any good nerd, was I developed a starship, and then I wrote a deck list, and I showed where the Arboretum's on deck 6 and engineering's on deck 12, and I made sure I had the decks lined up so that they were autistically drawn out. Then I went and like kind of made a crew for it, and then I started getting into plots and the like. And so I made a little commentary about that, and then I built a little socio political society around that, and built a plot around that. And that's kind of how I came up with like, okay, this is where I'm going to start my Planet of the Week adventures from. And then from there, I just came up with a list of other concepts and brainstormed them. And I had 4 or 5 of them. You also get the best of episodic shows because each one really has its own open and shut sci-fi concept that they have to resolve, like the Next Generation used to have. And so that became the onus of this entire series and high concept. This is why I'm crowdfunding it and not just placing it up on Amazon too, because this is not an Amazon algorithm writing idea. This is not the way you should do that if you're going to write that algorithm. It's too complicated to explain, like I just did, this is Battlestar Galactica meets Independence Day. Like I can't really do that with this. And so the crowdfund and saying, hey, if you personally like agree with what I'm talking about with storytelling on Star Trek and Tron or whatever I'm talking about that week, you'll probably like my books. Check them out. It's an easier way to sell that and the high concept and the high art than it is to write the algorithm.
Absolutely. It definitely is. And you're very right about that with the Amazon. It's like you really kind of have to have that, familiar trope and they're together and you should buy this. Otherwise it kind of just gets swept under the rug. And so it's fantastic. Like I would have never thought about crowdfunding simply because you have people who are more invested in actually reading through the whole concept instead of just looking for a tagline. So that's really good stuff. So what is the end game for you? So you're building up Fandom Pulse and that's getting bigger and that's looking great. You have Valiant Frontiers launching. You have all of these books. You also have some nonfiction books. What Churchianity came back to great success a couple of months ago. That's doing really well. So where is this going? What does success look like in, we'll say, 5 years from now?
Well, I mean, I just do the math and I need to sell about 5x what I do now to just kind of be comfortable forever. And that's all I really care about. I mean, I don't need to make movie. Well, I'm going to make movies with AI, but I don't need to get into Hollywood. I don't need to necessarily get rich from all this stuff, but I do want it to be sustainable to where I feel like I can feed my family. I'd love to not even have crowdfunding at all, just so I could, here's the thing, and go like Eric July is doing at this point. That's kind of the, what he's doing is really similar to what I'd like to do long term. But yeah, in 5 years, if it grows big enough, I'd back off of YouTube a little bit because I want to spend the time writing. I care way more about that than anything else. I started YouTube kind of late, believe it or not. And I really only built this the last 2 years on YouTube. And if I started back in the golden days of YouTube, I'd probably be a lot bigger right now. But I wanted to be a writer, and even back when I've always written nonfiction articles. I wrote for the Federalist, for PJ Media, for Milo Yiannopoulos, and back then I was like, I don't need YouTube because I'm going to be a writer. And I found out really quickly that people don't actually pay attention to who writes the articles, but they do on YouTube because they connect with your face and hi everybody,
Right.
and that actually spurs on the brand a little bit more.
I think you're right about that. So if I've got a guy in my audience right now and he wants to build what you've built, the multi-platform presence, the sustainable income, he's got the same goals as you do, but he doesn't have any existing platform right now. So what would you say would be his first move? Like, okay, here's the tactical decision of what you can do tomorrow to get that started.
Find a niche that you're related to. So obviously we've talked about Star Trek a lot with mine, and that's part of my niche. Comics are part of my niche because I make comics. I'm bad because I'm in too many niches. But if I were to do it over again, you'd be in one niche. And so if you're into Warhammer 40K, be the guy who has all the Warhammer 40K info and the best Warhammer 40K memes and thoughts about Warhammer 40K. Or if you're into Conan the Barbarian, be the guy who's into Conan the Barbarian and like every new Conan thing that's coming out, you're on top of it before anybody else is, giving interviews with people who are experts on Conans and whatever it is. Be in one niche and have that related to what you're doing. So obviously, if you're doing Conan, you'd probably be a sword and sorcery style writer. And then you come out with that and people will go, okay, I like Conan and I like you. I'm going to check out your iteration of Conan because you are an authority on Conan. So you should probably do a pretty good job with this, right? And that's how you get people to pay attention to this sort of thing. And most people, I feel like, are much more into one or two things in general. I was talking to somebody who said, I love it. I tune into all your videos whenever you do sci-fi publishing drama. But when you do gaming or comics, I don't watch them. And that's actually the problem I'm running into with my channel right now. It's like, okay, I did gaming for the last week and that went very viral. Well, then I switched back to publishing because nothing's happening in gaming and publishing isn't the same group, right? And so different people tune in and then it confuses the algorithm.
Yeah.
And everything's very algorithmic right now and very siloed. So the more focused you are and and you have to do content every day. Do not stop ever for any reason, every single day. That's the other thing. And then you could build a brand on that and just keep it consistent.
That is fantastic advice. And people hear that and they're just like, oh, that sounds exhausting. Real talk, it is. And you talk about not wanting to do YouTube anymore, or at least pedal back on it a lot, because it really is a different part of your brain than sitting down and writing a story and brainstorming a story and versus creating content. The marketing and the writing are two very different things. They're both creativity and they're both very important, but they are very different things. And so a lot of times you see that with creators, they get so sucked into the content that they're not creating anymore. So that can be a very difficult balance to strike. So it's good that people understand that there is a sacrifice, but you still need, if you want to build, you do have to be present, and you have to be present every day. So unfortunately,
That's right.
Where can people find you? What is the best place for people to locate you? And if they want to pick up or they want to contribute to Valiant Frontiers and get those copies in their hands, where can they go?
Sure. My name is everywhere, Jon Del Arroz. And somebody actually asked me on YouTube earlier, they said, will you change your YouTube to be more about the topic than as a name? And I'm like, I don't even understand why. I'm like, I'm just here to sell my books. So, but yes, my name's pretty easy to find. I'm on X, I'm on YouTube. We have a great Discord community, I got to say, of a lot of good readers. We're pretty right-wing and religious. That is a thing. So as long as you're not uncomfortable with that, we're usually cool with pretty much everybody. And then Valiant Frontiers is on Fund My Comic. Even though it is not a comic, it is a full science fiction trilogy of novels. And we're doing cool premium editions. Like we are pulling out the stops for the hardcovers, and they're very pretty and very cool. I don't have an example of the hardcovers right now, but I'm also, through that, doing a leather-bound edition of my first science fiction trilogy in that same thing, which this is not my first science fiction trilogy. Obviously, it's Swiss Family Robinson. But this is the leather-bound bindery that's going to be doing it. And you can see they're just as like good or better than the Easton Press stuff because I'm a leather-bound book collector. And so I want to have my books like that. So we're doing super high-quality premium stuff. It's really awesome. And thank you for having me and let me tell people what this is about. It's great.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on.